They said muscle cars were dead. Not struggling. Not fading. Dead. Killed by emissions laws. Replaced by silent electric motors. Left behind by a world that suddenly cares about efficiency more than excitement. For years now, the same narrative keeps repeating itself. This is the end. This time it's different. There's no coming back. And yet, every single time, they come back. Not weaker. Not quieter. But louder. Faster. More aggressive than before. So maybe the real question isn't whether muscle cars are dying. Maybe the real question is, why do they keep refusing to die? Because at this point, it doesn't make sense anymore. Everything is working against them. Fuel prices are higher. Regulations are stricter. Cities are pushing for electric-only zones. And technology has moved on. Modern electric cars are faster than most traditional muscle cars could ever dream of being. Instant torque. Perfect traction. No delay. On paper, muscle cars have already lost. But reality tells a completely different story. Because muscle cars were never built to win on paper. They were built to win somewhere else entirely. Emotion. To understand that, you have to go back to the beginning. Late 1960s. America was in the middle of something unique. Gas was cheap. Roads were wide. And car companies were competing in a way that feels almost impossible today. There were no limits. No hesitation. Just one simple idea. Build something faster than everyone else. And make sure people feel it. That's how the first true muscle cars were born. Massive V8 engines dropped into relatively lightweight cars. No balance. No subtlety. Just raw power. Cars like the Mustang. The Charger. The Camaro. They weren't perfect. In fact, by modern standards, they were deeply flawed. But that's exactly what made them special. Because they didn't feel controlled. They felt alive. When you started the engine, it didn't whisper. It roared. The entire car shook. You didn't just hear it. You felt it. Through the steering wheel. Through the seat. Through your chest. And when you pressed the gas. There was no smooth, predictable acceleration. There was chaos. The rear wheels would fight for grip. The car would try to break loose. And for a brief moment, it felt like you were barely in control. That feeling. That edge. That's what people fell in love with. Not speed. Not numbers. But the experience. And here's the key detail most people miss. Experiences don't become obsolete. Technology does. But experiences? They stay relevant forever. That's why even today, in a world full of advanced, perfectly engineered machines, people still crave something raw. Something imperfect. Something real. Now fast forward to today. Cars are smarter than ever. They're safer. More efficient. More powerful in ways that were unimaginable decades ago. Electric cars can outperform almost anything in a straight line. And they do it effortlessly. No noise. No vibration. No drama. Just clean, instant speed. And for a lot of people, that's exactly what they want. But not for everyone. Because something got lost along the way. The connection. The sense that you're controlling something powerful. Modern cars remove that tension. They remove the struggle. They remove the unpredictability. And in doing so, they also remove part of the excitement. It's like watching a perfectly edited action scene versus being inside it. One looks impressive. The other feels real. That's the difference muscle cars still offer. They're not perfect. They're not efficient. They're not even practical. But they're engaging. And that's something no spec sheet can measure. Now here's where things take an interesting turn. Because muscle cars aren't just surviving out of nostalgia. They're adapting. And that's what makes them dangerous in the best way possible. Because adaptation means survival. The industry is changing. There's no denying that. Electric power is the future. Regulations will only get stricter. And the traditional formula of a massive V8 engine is becoming harder to justify. But that doesn't mean the idea of a muscle car disappears. It just means it evolves. Because again, what actually defines a muscle car? Is it the engine? Or is it the feeling it creates? Because if it's just about the engine, then yes, muscle cars are on borrowed time. But if it's about the feeling, then the story is far from over. Because that feeling can be recreated in new ways. Electric motors can deliver insane torque instantly. Far more than traditional engines ever could. And if that power is delivered in a way that feels aggressive, unpredictable, alive, then the essence of a muscle car is still there. It just looks different. And that's the part many people don't want to accept. Because we tend to associate identity with form. But identity is deeper than that. It's about experience. And experiences can evolve without losing their core. Imagine a future muscle car that doesn't rely on a traditional engine, but still delivers that same adrenaline rush. That same sense of danger. That same emotional reaction. Would it still be a muscle car? For some people, the answer is no. But for others, it absolutely is. And that divide is exactly where the future is being decided. Now let's go beyond technology for a moment. Because there's something even more powerful at play here. Culture. Muscle cars aren't just machines. They're symbols. They represent a specific idea. Freedom. Power. Rebellion. And those ideas don't disappear just because technology changes. They adapt. They find new forms. But they remain. That's why muscle cars continue to exist in movies, in video games, in music, in online content. They're constantly being reintroduced to new generations. People who never experienced the original era, but still understand the appeal instantly. Because it's universal. You don't need to explain why a loud, aggressive car is exciting. You feel it immediately. And that's what keeps the culture alive. Even if production stopped tomorrow. Even if no new muscle cars were ever built again. They still wouldn't disappear. Because millions already exist. On roads. In garages. In collections. Being restored. Modified. Driven. Shared online. That ecosystem doesn't just vanish. It sustains itself. And in many ways, it becomes even stronger when something becomes rare. Which brings us to another critical factor. Scarcity. As muscle cars become less common, they don't become irrelevant. They become valuable. Desirable. Legendary. Because humans are naturally drawn to things that are disappearing. Things that feel like they belong to a different time. And that creates a powerful effect. The fewer muscle cars there are, the more people want them. The more attention they get. The more they're talked about. And the stronger their legacy becomes. Which leads to a strange paradox. Trying to eliminate muscle cars might actually be what makes them last forever. Because now they're not just products. They're icons. And icons don't die easily. But there's still one final piece to this. And it might be the most important one. Human nature. Because at the end of the day, everything comes down to what people truly want. Not what's logical. Not what's efficient. But what feels right. And humans are not purely logical creatures. We're emotional. We're drawn to intensity. To experiences that make us feel something. And muscle cars deliver exactly that. They're loud. They're aggressive. They demand attention. They don't try to blend in. They stand out. And in a world that's becoming more controlled, more optimized, more predictable, that kind of raw, unapologetic presence becomes even more appealing. Not less. Because the more the world moves toward silence, the more people crave noise. The more it moves toward control, the more people crave chaos. And the more it becomes digital, the more people crave something physical, something real. That's why muscle cars aren't just surviving. They're becoming a statement. A way of saying, I don't want everything to be perfect. I don't want everything to be quiet. I want something that makes me feel alive. And as long as that mindset exists, muscle cars will always have a place. They might evolve. They might change form. They might even sound different one day. But the core idea, the emotion, the experience, that will always find a way to survive. Because it has to. Because people need it. And as long as people need it, muscle cars will never die.